Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to my online public meeting for North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service. It's been a little while since we've been on air online, so I hope you've all had a super summer. I'm Commissioner Zoe and I'll be chairing this meeting. So we're going to start with any apologies, and we've got Matt, who hasn't been here, isn't able to join us today. And just to say that the recording of our previous meeting is on our website if you'd like to refer back to it. We don't keep minutes of this, we just refer everybody to the previous meeting on our website. Okay, so we're going to go to the performance update now. So can I hand over to Damien for this, please?
Thank you, Commissioner. Hopefully you can all see the slides now. So this is our presentation on our performance for the reporting period from the 1st of June to the 31st of July 2023. And on this slide, we've got our main summary of performance. So I'll go through some of the bullets on this, and as we move through the slides, we will see the dashboards behind this. So on the first bullet point, we have completed 661 safe and well visits in this reported period. A count of 129 declined the service on contact. One of the key areas that we look at on this, and this is one of the areas that NYFRS look at, is those referrals that we get into the service that are past their visit date. This is something that we have only just recently started recording about 4 or 5 months ago, and there's been significant progress in lowering the numbers. I think when we first started it, there was well over 100 people that were past their visit date. It's now at a count of 44, and actually out of those 44, 29 of those people have had contact tried to be made, but they haven't been able to make that contact. That can be for numerous reasons, given that these are our most vulnerable members of the community. It can be at times that they've actually been admitted to hospital care, but we continue to try and make 3 attempts. And if we are unsuccessful with that, we refer back to the referring agency just to make sure that when they're back available for a visit, that we can continue to do that. Bullet point 3 is around our community safety activities, and I will discuss that later in the slide deck because there's a breakdown of the other community safety activities that we've done over this period. There is 320 of the RRO fire safety audits. I'm not going to go through that in much detail because we've got Group Manager Pete Gregory here as part of the spotlight who will do all of the protection activity. Operational learning continues to be reported at a very high level, and that is a really important part of our business area. The operational learning, because the incidents that we go to are reducing, and that's across all of the fire sector, it's important that we take every opportunity to have those debriefs, get in the operational learning so that we can improve our policies, our procedures, and the training that we offer through our training centre. With regards our average response time, this has been reported quite widely in the media as there has been an increase in national response standards. I've done some work with this to look at how we're doing it, and we're making sure that our data is correct and accurate and cleansed. I recently received the digital analysis packs, which are published by NYFRS. Each of those areas, so the Home Office, NYFRS, and ourselves internally with the response principles, slightly record those details differently. On the HMI website, and they look at dwelling fires rather than all primary fires, which can include vehicles and other incidents. We have a response time to those dwelling fires of 9 minutes and 29 seconds. And actually, there are 9 services across English Fire and Rescue Services that have a slower time to that key data set than ourselves. And given that we're the largest county in the survey in the country, that's quite a reasonable statistic, although we would like to improve it further. Our low speed incidents continue to be the majority of our vehicle accidents. We have done some research following the last OPM in July, and this shows that this is consistent not only across emergency services but the wider LGV incidents and the insurance claims. You did ask us at the last meeting to look at the cost of that, and of the 18 incidents that we reported, the approximate cost per accident is £1,300, but that has been distorted by one of the accidents equating to over half of the £25,000, and actually the majority of these incidents, the remedial work that is needed is below £500 per repair. And each
Damien,
of the, sorry.
No, I cut you up then. Sorry, Damien, go on.
I was just going to finish off by saying each of those incidents is investigated and discussed at our Health and Safety Committee. So what we do there, we just review who was involved with that accident. We look at their training records. We look at their electronic learning to make sure have they done the bank person electronic learning, just to make sure we're doing everything that we can from a service perspective to reduce those as far as is reasonably practicable.
So you see, I shouldn't have come in because you just answered my question there, Damien. But I suppose really I know that relatively compared to across the country, what you're saying is, it's in line, but it's still high, isn't it, for us? And I just want to make sure that we are getting some learning for it. And these occurrences don't happen as often because it's still, money that needs to be spent. So you are aware of that. And I hear that you're trying to do that prevention work. Okay.
Quite right, Commissioner. And finally, on this slide, our appliance availability is showing at 78%, which is 3% less than the previous year. And again, I had a look at the HMI CFRS statistics on this to get the national picture. We are showing on the statistics for 22-23 as 81.3% overall availability. This actually places us 19th out of the 37 services that submitted statistics for this area. And again, given that some of those services, some of the metropolitan areas like London, West Midlands, Greater Manchester, they only have whole-time provision. Actually, our availability is at normal levels and actually quite a bit better than some of our similar services in the predominantly rural grouping.
Well, I hear that, Damien, but it has impacted this summer, hasn't it, availability? And although I hear what you're saying to me, that we are sort of like in the middle there and, it's nothing to be too concerned about, it has impacted us as a service. So actually, what are you doing about it? Because we can't rest on laurels of stats, can we? It's, what are you actually doing as a service about that?
No, certainly, and we are looking to improve that. And we took some dynamic dynamic measures throughout the summer period. So with the lower levels of availability, we introduced business continuity meetings on a regular basis, dependent how low our overall availability was. That considered all aspects of our business. So that was including what training courses we had on, what events were going on in the community, because we had such events as the EBOR meeting in York, and we also had the Leeds Festival just over the border. So we considered all of those areas. And I'd just like to offer the public thanks to our tactical level officers who work as Silver, who make sure that they dynamically move the appliances around alongside control to limit the impacts that we have with that lower availability. What we are looking for, though, is obviously sustainable improvement in this area. And what we're doing currently is, as the Chief Fire Officer committed to, we're looking to substantiate all levels within the organisation, which will give us more stability. We've provided funding for an on-call station manager who will be looking at all aspects of on-call, including recruiting, retaining of our on-call members of staff. We are aware that there's significant issues to attracting on-call members, but we're doing lots of work to do that. And one of the most recent pieces of work we've started to explore is currently, as a service, we can monitor and measure the hours that our on-call members of staff give us, but we can't actually monitor the patterns that they work. And that's a really important key area, because if we have a station with 10 on-call staff, but they all give us 7 in the morning until 7 at night, we've only got 50% availability. So we really need to monitor those working patterns to maximise the availability at each of the locations.
Thanks, Damien.
So with prevention, I did mention the other activities that have been going on within this reporting period. The themes are boat fire safety, drowning prevention, home fire safety. We undertook a crucial crew in the Scarborough area, which is a multi-agency event aimed at young people. 43 schools and over 1,100 pupils attended that. And we did have attendance from our community safety officers at the Great Yorkshire Show as well. All of this work equated to 11 days spent undertaking the water safety, and 47 days are allocated to the home fire safety. So in addition to those key areas of the safe and well visits, protecting people in their homes, we're doing the wider work around further community engagement activities.
Yeah, I have to say, Damien, that there's been some fantastic work being done here. Really pleased to see this. Just got a quick question. How can you explain to me that how a home fire safety check can be done by phone? How is that possible?
Normally with the home fire safety checks, what will happen is there'll be a series of questions which will assess the level of risk of those property owners. So when they ask those questions, it will say if they're a low, medium, high or very high individual. Obviously, we will then prioritise based upon risk, those very high and high. And as I previously stated about the timescales, once we get those through, we're monitoring the timescales that it takes us to get to those individuals to make sure that we're addressing based solely on risk and getting to the people that need us most quickly. But that triage really helps us make sure that we're maximising the efforts of our community safety staff.
Okay, thank you.
So this slide just shows us the breakdown between community safety officers and our operational staff. It does show that we've done a high number, 153 safe and wells within very high and high. But if you've got no questions on that, Commissioner, I'll look to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And here are some of the protection statistics. I don't intend on going through that in any detail unless you've got any questions, because obviously we've got Group Manager Gregory that will be able to answer them far more eloquently than I can.
I've only got one question really quickly because I'm mindful of time today, and that is, what makes a premises high risk?
Oh,
Should we leave that for Pete?
I think you should leave that for Pete. I could answer it, and it is a number of factors, but Pete will be able to answer that relating to the actual legislation rather than my answer to you, Commissioner.
Okay.
Thank you. So this is around our site-specific risk information. So our site-specific risk information, some of the buildings and other areas like water risk across our communities, and our firefighters go in and they gather that information that will assist them if there is an incident, to be able to mitigate the effects of that as much as they possibly can. As you can see from this, we have over 1,400 sites where we gather this information, and we're actually at almost 100%. I think this recording period we're at 90%, which is really, really positive with that amount of risks, and it does assist our firefighters when they go to these incidents, that they will have tactical plans and they will have all the information that they need to be able to resolve that incident as effectively and efficiently as they possibly can. Operational learning. This is a really important area, and I know I'm going to talk later about our improvement works with NYFRS, but this is a key area that they look at just to make sure that we're learning from the incidents that we have, and actually the exercise that we take with other agencies and across border with our neighbouring services. And as you can see, we've had 10 separate exercises completed across the service and with neighbouring fire and rescue services and partner agencies. A number of these have been at high level, and we actually hosted a regional strategic level seminar, which was well attended in person and online, which talked about some of the risks that we hold in North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue, and one risk in particular, which is part of the critical national infrastructure. As I say, this is an area where we have done lots of work, and actually we have been approached by NFCC to assist them as they move to an organisational learning team. And because of the incident debriefs and the reporting that we've submitted to them, they've asked North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue to be part of a trial as they move into the wider organisational learning than just that operational incidents and exercises. Health and safety statistics. So this is a breakdown of health and safety statistics for the service over the entire year. I think it was asked previously, Commissioner, at our last one in July, because there was a high number of other incidents. So there is actually a breakdown on the bottom right of this now, so people can see what those other incidents are, and as you can see, it's a number of incidents. But in July we had 3 accidents reported, one which was a slip, trip or fall, and we had one which was the attendance at a water rescue incident and feeling unwell after being in the water, and the other was unfortunately an accident that we had with our fire bike that has been out and about in the community all over the summer period, doing that good work with our biker communities from in North Yorkshire and wider. The appliance accidents that are referred to in the summary, this shows all of the appliance incidents, and we've highlighted those that are slow moving in red, just so that we can see the amount of that are. And as I said previously, I sit on the Health and Safety Committee alongside the Deputy Chief Fire Officer, and each of these incidents are investigated and reported, and then reported back to districts if required. But the actual reporting of appliance accidents and the person injuries is really well managed, not just by the health and safety team, but also people that are submitting the health and safety returns. Response. So this is showing our overall availability, as it shows 79% for June and 78% for July. This is an area that we're focusing on in great detail to try to maximise the availability where we can, and to make sure that the availability meets those times of demand and risk at each of the station locations that we've got across North Yorkshire. And that's a breakdown of our on-call availability across each of the station areas. As you can see, there's a number there that provide really high availability to us, and others where it's not so good, but each of the station managers are looking on that. We do have some of the issues with our supervisory officers and the number of those, but as I've previously said, the work we've got going on with our promotion processes and trying to get to that point where we've got the stability of people in their roles, hopefully that will support people then to move up into those supervisory roles, which will mean we'll increase availability. There's other issues and barriers that we've got quite legitimately from outside of the organisation. So the National Fire Chiefs Council fire standards on driving, it's now a 3-week course to get people trained for driving, which obviously when our on-call staff that are serving the communities have their primary employment, we're having to look at innovative ways that we can make sure that they get trained up without it impacting on their primary employment.
Damien, I really would like to understand about what the figures look like pre the cover moves for both hold time and on-call, please. So maybe we can pick that up out of this meeting if that's all right, but and actually the post-cover moves are actually happening on a monthly basis, please.
Yes, certainly. We'll look to do that, Commissioner. That will be a challenge given how dynamically the cover moves are made, but certainly we will see, and I will speak to our data analyst to see what we can do with regards to that.
Thank you.
And with regards to our response principles, as we've stated, our average time to primary fires within North Yorkshire was 13 minutes and 9 seconds. We are doing some significant work to make sure that we cleanse our data on this. And at this point, we have looked at incidents which have been recorded on the system as primary incidents, primary fires, which weren't, and this actually shows that there will be some reduction already in that 13 minutes and 9 seconds, but we're doing a lot of work on there just to make sure that our data is as accurate as possible. This graph shows what I said earlier on the summary, that there is an increase nationally in the response times, but certainly this is one of the areas that we're looking at. We're looking to improve, and there are the 3 aspects that come to make the response time. There's the time it takes our fire service control to handle the call. There is the turnout time for our on-call and hold time staff to actually get to station and go to the incident, and then the drive time. Obviously, based on our response principles, the drive time, we want them to do as safely as we possibly can, but we will look wherever possible to see if there's improvements that we can make with regards to turnout times and also control call handling.
Yeah, Damien, I think the public that are watching this and myself would really like to understand, you know, we've got 600 lower incidents happening, but yet the response times are probably a little bit more. You would expect it to be lowered. Can you just bottom out that for me, please?
Sorry, could you repeat that question, Commissioner?
So I've got here that total incidents responded to is 600 lower. Okay.
Yes.
But the response times are still higher, aren't they?
Yes.
So, and I have a pretty good idea what the answer is going to be, but for the public watching this, I think that would be a question. So can you just explain that a bit more, please?
Yes, certainly. And one of the areas we've discussed already, Commissioner, it's that availability of our resources. So if resources aren't available, we then have to rely on one of their neighbouring stations, which would have further travel time. Our travel time is considerable. We have a number of isolated rural locations across North Yorkshire. So dependent where we get the incidents, we can have some incidents that will not distort the figures, but they will add a considerable time onto the average because we know that they're in low risk rural locations.
Thank you.
This shows the incident count from January 2021 to 2023. As you can see, we have gone over the summer period there, and with the exceptional hot weather of last year, incidents have lowered. And this is our unwanted fire signals. I am sure Group Manager Gregory will cover this, given the work that we have done with regards call challenging. And as you can see from that graph, over recent months, we've had a considerable drop there in the unwanted fire signals. This is the false alarms, which again, Group Manager Gregory will cover, but it just shows where we have those false alarms. Most of them are in dwellings, which obviously we will attend if it's in a dwelling until we're informed that it is actually a false alarm. This slide talks about our fatal, injured and rescued. Number of information on this with our emergency first responders who attend incidents and support Yorkshire Ambulance Service. We have had an increase in this, but it is some really key work to support Yorkshire Ambulance Service to make sure that they're getting into the properties. And we have had an increase in our road traffic collisions and assisting other agencies, which are predominantly medical emergencies.
Can I just put a plea in, Dave, please?
Yes.
When you do this, can you just make sure that we don't use the acronym FIR? Really don't like it. If you don't mind, can we have it in full fatally injured, please?
Certainly.
Thank you. And also, while we're on it, people, can you not refer to people as counts, please, on this? Because I just think it's I know the terminology is on your dashboard, but actually
Yes.
families who've lost loved ones are watching this, you know, they might find it upsetting. So would you mind doing that going forward? Thank you.
Certainly, Commissioner.
Thank you.
And that was the final slide. And just to ask if there's any further questions.
Well, I think I've asked all my questions. Anybody else? I don't see anybody's hands up, but thank you so much, Damien. As predicted, we've gone over time, but I thought that those questions were well to be asked, and I'm really impressed with that pack. There's a lot of information in there, maybe a little bit too much information. We might need to have a bit of a discussion behind the scenes about maybe loading all that information onto our website before the meeting. We do the highlights of it, but we can do that after this meeting. Thank you very much, Damien. Really appreciate that. Right, so let's crack on to the main presentation. And Pete Gregory, welcome. And it's all about protection. So can I hand over to you, please?
Yes, of course, Commissioner. Yes, good afternoon. Welcome. So my name's Group Manager Pete Gregory, been referred to quite a few times on the previous conversation. I'll endeavour to answer the questions that Damien's put forward, but we'll see how we progress on that one as we go along. Hopefully that should just be coming up onto your screen now. Just put it into presentation mode there.
It is, thank you.
Lovely. So the world of protection, commonly known as fire safety, it's a specialist role which looks at commercial premises within the county, and wider from that point of view, which covers lots of different types of premises. And this presentation is to go through the following points. So we're going to look at a bit of an overview of protection and activities that we currently have, and also aligning that to our risk resource model, or the RRM, as you'll hear me say that a few times, and contribute to obviously the fire and rescue plan from yourself. We'll also look at explain what's going well at the moment in the world of protection, some challenges that we certainly have, and also the dynamic changes we're having at the moment, and also explain plans for the future, improvements for the future, and how those have impacts. So quite nice little pictorial one there to have a look at, to fathom out. So this is all about legislation changes. Since 2017, since the Grenfell disaster, there's been an awful lot of change, as you would expect, through different inquiries as an outcome from Grenfell. And these three main areas of acts and legislation changes have really affected the world of protection or fire safety quite significantly. So I just wanted to take a moment just to run through these so people have an understanding of how that has an impact in quite a simplistic term, so I don't go into too much detail because legislation become very confusing. So before I start, I just want to mention about our legislation that we use for our regulation throughout the Fire Services Act is through what we call the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order. So I'm going to refer to that as the Fire Safety Order as we go along in this presentation, otherwise it gets quite lengthy on terminology. But that is our regulation, that's what we would use for any determinations that we would make when we conduct our audits or we do any regulatory activity or enforcement activity. That is predominantly what we would use. That's a piece of legislation which dates back to 2005 and came into effect in 2007, approximately about 2007. So some of this legislation you can see on the screen now, such as the first one which came in was 2021, which was the Fire Safety Act. Now that links into the FSO, or the Fire Safety Order, in looking at, as you won't be surprised, specifically residential multi-occupied premises, predominantly looking at high risk residential premises. So to define that, it would be premises that are more than 7 floors in height or over 18 metres. So those types of premises, which we do not have that many in the county, we have approximately around about mid-30 of those currently existing, about 34 to 35 of these premises. I say 34 to 35 because there was a slight discrepancy on the height when it initially came out, this legislation, and it was redefined to 7 floors, whereas originally they stated 6 floors. So it created a bit of confusion about how to measure 18 metres, which might sound a bit petty, but it's actually quite large for the changes in the legislation for those that reside there, but also the developers and those that manage these types of premises. So that legislation in essence, in the Fire Safety Act, came in and it looked at what we call the external wall systems. So as most people, I'm sure, are aware of the cladding issues that were on Grenfell, it looks predominantly at those features, and it aligns to the responsibilities of who looks after, who maintains, who enforces on the back of the external wall systems. That, interestingly, covers balconies and external windows of premises as well. So anything of the feature on the outside of those particular premises, which is quite significant changes that have come in on that one. Previously to this act coming in, the fire service in these types of premises only had legislative responsibilities or regulatory responsibilities for what we would call the common areas. That is, as you enter one of these premises, so if you think of a traditional block of flats, for example, as you enter the staircases, as you go up to the front doors, but not including the front doors of the individual flats or premises that would be in there if it's multi-occupied. However, this change in legislation has given it more definition that we would look on not only the external, but we'd also look up to and including now the front doors also of those flats, because of the risk of, if a fire was to start in one of the flats, which it did at Grenfell, had the fire doors or the doors on the front of that particular premises failed at any point, then the smoke and the effects of the fire would spread very quickly into the compartmentation areas and the common areas of that particular flat. So it has made a significant difference on the regulatory changes of the order. The second piece of legislation that's come in a year later in 2022 was the fire safety, and this is applicable to England. The previous one was England and Wales, is the regulations. Now, this is a regulation which basically acts on what we call Article 24 of the fire safety order. And what that means is it imposes a duty on those that are responsible for the main or accountable, if you like, for these premises. So this can be managing agents, and sometimes it could be private ownership, depending on the dynamics of these types of premises that we're looking at. So again, this is high-rise residential buildings that we're still focusing on at the moment. So with the regulations, it imposed the duty of these types of premises, or any premises which would come into it that might come into where you've got multi-occupied by businesses in there. So large buildings, we don't have any of those in this county, but in metropolitan areas that would be accountable for those areas. And it focuses on ensuring that the facilities within are maintained correctly, and if there's any faults on those areas, they must be reported to the fire and rescue services. That would also include that they must supply plans and relevant information to the local fire and rescue service, so we're fully equipped. So previously, Damien, I heard on this presentation mentioned about a terminology called SSRI, Sites of Specific Risk Information. That is where this sits into it, so that our crews have that information readily available, so they can go and check on the facilities, check on the working operability of these facilities inside. Now, these facilities are things which you may or may not be aware of, but we have certain facilities such as what we call dry risers. So you can imagine if a building's more than 18 metres in height, to get water to those top floors is quite difficult. So it's a vertical pipe, which, as it states, dry, doesn't have water into it, but we can plug in at the base, fill it full of water, and then we could use that at the upper levels, as opposed to dragging hose all the way up and through. Other areas that we'd be looking at as well, that we need to be informed if there's any defects, which is really important, is a firefighting lift, which is a specially designed lift that can be used for firefighting operations where we wouldn't expect the public to be using those lifts or the residents within those particular blocks of flats. So if there's any problems with any of these items, they have a legal obligation to inform the fire service, which we have a system set up. They inform us. We would then note it on our SSRI system, so the crews have got markers within the internal computer systems of the fire engines to see that there's a default, so they are forewarned of a problem there. They should then let us know when these problems have been rectified, ideally in the shortest possible time. So that's a little bit of a mitigation caveat that's been put in under that legislation. It does extend a little bit more to what is expected in these types of premises to retrofit in those premises as well, such as glowing, I use the term, it's called wayfinding signage. So it would be signage that stands out in smoky conditions, and this would assist any firefighting operations. Heaven forbid that there's smoke within the common areas as they're going up the staircase, to make it obvious which floor they're on, and any signage that will give us directions of where the floor pathway is to go. Just makes it much clearer and more acceptable. The final part of the legislation there is the Building Safety Act, which came into effect this year in January. And there is a section with it, which is going to come on to the next slide, where we have got a significant change that comes into that one. But the Building Safety Act is a combination. This is looking at manufacturing of materials and new builds of high-rise residential buildings, and it will extend to high-risk premises for the future. So we are also looking at hospitals and other uses, what we would call complex premises, that would meet in height a very high standard, but it will be extended in years to come. It uses what they call a gateway series, a gateway 1, 2, 3 series of legislative powers, where the design of a building is carefully looked at by different organisations to ensure that the materials, the construction methods, and then the sign off for these buildings is complete and correct. Again, linking back to Grenfell, the findings of Grenfell, where the outcomes from the inquiries show quite significant problems in those areas. So the Building Safety Act is designed there. We do have what's called a building safety regulator, which the fire services are going to be linked into. We also have an ombudsman, I can never say this word, but an ombudsman, which it looks at the new homes aspects of these types of premises. And we've also got a regulator which looks at construction products as well. So it's all linked together under this piece of Building Safety Act legislation. So it's trying to make it very robust on the way that these types of premises are built, manufactured and looked after from design stage right through to end of life stage, if you like. So it's all the way through a building's lifespan, and that it's accountable all the way through. That's the general purpose of those pieces of legislation. A lot of information there, Commissioner. I'm not sure if there's got any questions.
No, you're okay. You carry on. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. So a significant date is the 1st of October, where on the back of the Building Safety Act, which was the last one I described there, we have a section 156 that links into our regulatory responsibilities and our legislation, the fire safety order. Now, that does actually have quite a significant change throughout lots, in fact, near enough every premises that comes under our commercial umbrella. The main one that it does affect is what we would call a fire risk assessment, which previously the main change there was down to the number of employees that a commercial premises had. If it was a small, quite independent maybe business that only had maybe 1 or 2 employees, they had a degree of exception from compiling a fire risk assessment, which determines what all the risks are in that particular premises and what they are doing about those risks, how to mitigate, how to reduce those risks within the type of premises that they're operating in. The change here is every premises will need to have a fire risk assessment, a written fire risk assessment, which would cover all the fire safety arrangements that need to be recorded within that as well. It should be completed by what we would use the word competent fire risk assessor as well. There is due to be a national register of fire risk assessors. That's not in place currently, although it is on a voluntary basis and it is out there at the moment. So those that would need maybe some assistance in that area could look towards the competent risk assessor, bearing in mind that the fire service and the role of the regulator is to audit. It wouldn't be appropriate for us to risk assess and then audit our work on that side of things. So there's a duplication of activity there. So our role is actually to audit, but obviously we'd always give advice and direction and guidance, which is out there to all those that are responsible persons. There is also, under this legislation of 156 changes, an increase in what we would call Article 22, which comes out of the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order, which is all to do with cooperation and communication. That's normally to do with multi-occupied buildings. So, for example, we may go to a premises where it's quite maybe a 3 or 4 story building, but there's different businesses that are occupying different parts of that building. So this is a bigger emphasis on making sure for the premises it's in its entirety that they talk to each other, they communicate with each other, they share information with each other about the individual risks that they may be using within their own businesses within that multi-occupied building, and they should be working closer together. It's been there all the time in Article 22, but there's more emphasis on this and more joining up of working together under that particular part. So it's that sharing of information. It also links into residential properties. So we would be expanding this out to our colleagues in local authority and partnerships we have with those for housing. So houses of multiple occupation, this is a focus even more in there. So if there's more than 2 different individuals working from not related anyway within a house, a shared occupancy, it also has relevancy within there. So again, risk assessments need to be in there. It also extends, Commissioner, because I know you've had an interest in this and a recent question about this one, to those premises that may come under the umbrella of Airbnb. I won't advertise that.
Yes,
there's lots of other providers out there as well, but it's for small premises that may be looking to rent out their premises for holiday lets, which we do have an awful lot for, obviously in the wonderful county of North Yorkshire. So that it does extend to that, and there's other guidance and documentation that is out there readily available. But 156 will come in and will impact certain to those type of companies that they have a legal obligation to ensure that they meet this standard under the Regulatory Reform Order. So that is a big change. Moving on, sorry.
Pete, and just a bit, I'm just looking at the time, so you've got about 15 minutes left, just to let you know that.
That's fine. I shall keep this pace going. So with the how we're going to implement the strategy. So at the moment we have a specialist team, which are specialists in the way that they are academically qualified and the experience they have. We also utilise our operational crews, which we've gone above and beyond probably the national standards, but we're still in line with the competency framework to do this, where we've upskilled several members of our supervisory management teams to be qualified to a level where they can go out and do fire safety advisory work, which is really helpful in our medium, low to low risk premises, which are relatively simple in their design. So we use that. So we have staff training as regulators under that guide. We've looked at regular updates to our website, both intranet, internet, so the public access to that. We've done lots of work on that. We've got lots of work going on with social media campaigns. We've just finished last week. We've had our national, through the NFCC, Business Fire Safety Week, where we've been out widely in the county looking at independent premises, looking at section 156, how that's going to come in and how that's going to be impactful to those. So we've targeted our resources, both operational crews and specialist crews, to get the word out through both campaigns and physical visits as well. We also, Commissioner, have a good links in with local authority, which links in with business forums, landlord forums, to get messages across there. We've got a programme set up for that, for the 156 changes and other changes we've had historically. Houses of multi-occupation, we've had changes in City of York Council recently with the ward changes there. So we are working very closely with there under that specialist advice that goes into there. So there's quite a lot of work in the background that goes on with a relatively small team. I think they've actually punched very, very well above the belt, actually, to coin a phrase on there. With unwanted fire signals. So this is one area that Damien's just mentioned on his presentation previously. So on the back of the fire and rescue plan that we've had and the RRM findings as well, that's the risk resource model, we did have a focus to increase work with our businesses where we did find that we were getting a lot of unwanted fire signals. So just again, for the members of the public that are watching this at the moment, that is an alarm that actuates within a premises, but it's a false alarm. It's actuated for many different reasons. It could be a fault on the system. It could be where the detectors are sited, maybe a change in the way that a business is operating, and they've not considered the type of detection, because not everybody looks up and considers that when they're changing their operations and what they're doing. So these are spurious alarms that have gone on. So we've worked quite well with looking at businesses and getting some information across. And we have a detailed response plan now, how we actually approach these. So what we've looked at is from the very basis of actually attending these incidents, we use a format of this particular card that goes out there to get the public's, the business's view and understanding of what an unwanted fire signal is, the impact that actually has on the service of responding to those, the cost implication that potentially can have. And this was all implemented on the 1st of April on the back of the risk resource model. We've looked at extending the policy out a little bit wider as well. So we are looking at introducing a charging system, which is a deterrent down the line. We wouldn't go straight to that, but that is when we work with the businesses to try and work out why these incidents are happening and come into a resolution of, for example, reciting. If this is a consistent problem, then there is an option down the line prior to doing any enforcement action to potentially charge to recoup some of the costs that were going out unnecessarily to some of these sites.
So Pete, can I just ask a question on that? So we've introduced that, have we now, that charging for false fire alarm signals and alarms, we've done that now.
Yes, sorry to interrupt. Yes, that is literally just come out now, and the policy has been changed onto it, and it's been trained out to the specialist staff. This will be for the specialist staff, not the operational crews, to actually deal with this, because it will be a case that we're dealing with these premises because it's down the line. We are aware of these problematic premises, so it will be a procedure. It's on a 5-step procedure that we would follow that through. It's not necessarily a last resort, but it's an option that we can use to do that where we're finding the message is not getting through to individuals. We are also aware that some companies maybe would prefer to pay that charge as an exception, as maybe not a deterrent that we might be looking at. So the other options would be to go down the line of enforcement action under our legislative and regulatory guidance that we can use. So it's just an option that we could use in there as a bit of a deterrent and to recoup costs.
I understand that, Pete, but if you do have businesses that prefer to pay, basically, it's like, how do you work with them? Because to support them and really understand why it is that they're in this position. Obviously you'll be doing that as well, won't you?
Yes, that's in the previous stages. This would be one of the last stages as an option that we'd need to use, or potentially we could use.
Thank you.
So some figures just on a bit of a graph on there. This is quite interesting. I'll read again, linking to Damien's previous presentation on the drop in unwanted fire signals. So what we have, we've two-folded this to reduce the signals after looking quite intently at the data that we had previously. So the top line there shows a comparison between years, last year, this year, same periods of time of April through to August. And what significantly is different is between the hours of 7 in the morning and 7 in the evening, so a 12-hour period of time, we are not responding to certain premises which are previously we would have responded to on a risk basis. We will still respond to commercial. This is commercial premises. I must stress this point. This is not to residential premises or premises that are commercially used that have a sleeping risk. So it's not applicable to that, but all other premises. The timeline has changed, and also the risk levels have changed. So where we have previously mentioned about the SSRI, the site-specific risk information, where we have what we've been determined as high or very high risk to our firefighters. So that might be, for example, an industry where they're using high combustible materials. Their practices, it might be to do with the layout of that premises is complex and difficult for firefighting operations. We've excluded those out of that list, and we will continue to respond to any unwanted to any automatic fire alarms at that time. But all other premises we will not be responding to between those hours. The rationale being that there will be somebody there at that period of time as well to back it, any confirmed fire with a 99 or a 999 call to come out to that. The main points there, as you can see, there is a significant drop between those hours of 7 and 7. There is 1 or 2 jumps in the middle of the night, strangely, and that's just possibly circumstantial information. We can't relate it to anything to do with the automatic fire alarms, although detailed analysis will be looked at between those, because this is summer months where historically we do have problems with small creatures getting inside automatic fire detection systems as well. So it's a bit of a maintenance issue that can be in there. Okay, this we mentioned before about risk-based, a risk-based approach to looking at these different types of incidents we go to, and the service assured itself through what we call a risk-based inspection program, or IBIP, and this is where we look at the highest risk. So to answer your question previously about how to define what is a high-risk premises, there's lots of ingredients to this particular one. It spans from the type of use of the premises, which is a nationally recognised, again down to the complexity of the use, the life risk within those. So for example, a hospital would be deemed, a residential care home is automatically deemed as a high risk premises. We've just talked about the number of floors, so anything above 18 metres or 7 floors or above is deemed to be a high risk premises because of the complexity and the risk that that involves with the residential element to it. We'd also look at the size of buildings. There's other factors that would come into it, as I mentioned, about the use, the storage of different types of equipment, and that would be related to the SSRIs. So there is national guidance on this of where we go on the types of home office categories, but there's also localisms that we'd also deem as what we would specify as high risk premises. And what we do is our staff, our specialist staff, would predominantly look at these and audit these because of the type of qualifications and experience they've got. And as I mentioned previously, our operational crews would look at more of the medium to low to very low premises. So prioritising our inspections, I think I've touched most of these, so I've jumped ahead a little bit. One area that I didn't mention is regarding mitigating features that we might have in these types of high risk premises, and the management also of these premises. So sprinklers also will be impacted to reduce the risk. However, it could still be deemed that that is still a high risk premises that we need to be thinking about. We'd also need to be thinking about the adequacy of any detection systems, which we've just touched on previously about unwanted fire signals. So it all comes together when we prioritise these types of premises. So when we look at this, our position in April this year, we had a few issues on our management information system that were identified, but we've looked at cleansing the information and the data on there. I think there's a lot of figures on this particular side, Commissioner, but there's a few areas really to focus on. That we have a data cleansing team and a project that's initiated in April that's identified initially looking at the high and very high risk-based premises. Worryingly at first to think this looks strangely out of tact of what we actually do have, and we recognise there was 1,357 high or very high risk premises. When we look through that in more detail and we look through our systems and the data, why these are high and very high premises, and are they overdue, or are they actually requiring to be put into place at that particular fund, we found a lot of inaccuracies on the data that was stored in there. The reasons behind that was a historical information that we had previously stored on a different management information system, where basically a lot of the information when we've done audits hadn't pulled through on what is called the complexity and the risk rating that we have gathered from the information by going out and auditing these premises. It didn't pull through for some reason, a technical reason by the IT side of things, that we've now managed to get scripts and workflows that will pull that through. There's an awful lot of work that still needs to be done on this, but we have managed to get through the highs and the very highs risk rating, and we're currently working on the medium risk to make sure that we do cleanse that information so the data is correct. We have had problems also with UPRNs, which are unique premises information numbers, and also the data from GIS, which is a geographical information system. So it's tying up lots of systems together to making sure we do have accurate data and all systems are talking to themselves. It's taking a lot of time to do this and get this sorted out, but it's so important that we do have that correct data. So we've worked from the highest risk premises identified, and we're working through now, nearly completed the medium, going down to the low and the very low premises that have been recognised. We've also recognised there's a lot of premises that have never had an audit, so we're focusing our crews to go out and do those, also to gather that data and that information as we move onwards, as well as regulating those highs and very high premises that we know have been identified already.
Okay, thank you.
So the post cleansing, as you can see there, probably on the first bullet point, is the most important part. There is a 77% reduction in those premises after that cleansing operation that's gone through, and the breakdown is there between the two categories of high risk and very high risk, and those that require have all been planned in to be completed by the end of this year as a priority, and the other 180 are already in date at the moment for their audits that have gone through. Partnership working, I've touched on shortly just a little while ago about local authorities. I think there's a couple of interesting points here that would be worth being aware of. One is the primary authority scheme. We currently have 2 businesses that we work with. What that basically means is we work in tandem with them, giving them what we call assured advice. They would make a payment for that assured advice. It's nationally known. Many fire and rescue services use the primary authority scheme, and the idea is if they are nationally known and have lots of stores, for example, then or different buildings that they regulate throughout the country, we give them some assured advice, and they will come back to us as an authority, a primary authority, to give them advice about problems that they might have, for example, down in Cornwall, a store that's down there where they may have had some regulatory activity by Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service, but we would have the impact of giving them the advice that they need to be aware of, and give them that corrective activity that they would have to do. We're looking at 2 really good opportunities to extend that to 4 different businesses. Skipton, which is Skipton Building Society, which is obviously a local entity that we have, which is really an exciting opportunity. And the other one is the Wilf Ward Trust, which is a charitable organisation. But the exciting part there, Commissioner, is we can cross the barriers with our prevention colleagues as well as our operational college, because we're looking at different types of premises here, which really we need to be looking at focusing it in a lot more detail. This comes under looking at cohesing sort of supported living activities, and these types of premises that are being used now more and more, which do have historically quite a lot of fire safety issues and problems, which can be quite easily put to one side. But again, this is a life risk premises that we're looking at for residential. So a great opportunity to move forwards on there. I've mentioned previously about the landlords forums, and we also have an impact on the safety advisory group. So we attend the different safety advisory groups. Again, Damien mentioned about the EWOL meeting. So we regularly attend different meetings for large events that are in the county, and have a very good seat on there to give assured advice again onto that side of things. Emerging issues. This is one that I know again that you have had a lot of to do with BESS, which stands for the Battery Energy Storage Systems, which nationally is with the greener note from central government at the moment going to net zero. That a lot of these sites are now starting to appear in different parts of the country. We are starting to see a growing trend of these types of sites, which are a storage site using lithium-ion battery storage and using various either from wind or from solar panel generation to store this energy. And in times where the energy on the grid, they supply the national grid from the stored energy to obviously supplement the country's energy requirements. They do come at a significant risk. And potentially fire risk. There has been 1 or 2 cases nationally and internationally where they have gone wrong in the past, where the lithium ion, if a fire does develop, it's called a thermal runaway, and it can have catastrophic events, which we are acutely aware of on our operational side. But from a protection side, we've been working quite closely together. I know, Commissioner, in passing information to and fro with the planning departments of North Yorkshire and making sure that we are really up to date. They are clearly understanding our predicament at the moment, as we're not currently, although I know you have written to both the Secretary of States that cover this area to express your concerns of these different sites that are coming up, and not necessarily the avoidance, but it's more that we as a fire and rescue service need to be at the table when these sites are being devised and planned, so we can put our points across. There is some national guidance that's come from the NFCC, which is a good direction. It's come from a few different areas, and we do also have policy statements on our internet site that we're directing people to. But as I know you're aware, that it is a concern for many people in the county of North Yorkshire with these sites that are coming out at the moment. And obviously we are acutely aware of that and working towards that at the moment.
Well, Pete, that's really good to hear that you've got such close links with North Yorkshire Council and you're working collaboratively together, because this is an issue. You're absolutely right. And hopefully I will play my part by writing to ministers that that the definition gets changed. So the North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service are actually consultees in the initial planning stage. So that's great. And thank you for that work there. Thank you.
It's paying dividends okay already, because we are having planning departments that have come back on the back of our letters going out and the information to ask our advice straight away on this one, because it's relatively new. They didn't have all the awareness to it, so it's good that we're trying to get that out there straight away. And there is a national push to get this through, as I'm sure you're aware, with different pieces of legislation at the moment through central government.
Thank you.
Okay, so existing and future challenges. We are looking, the pictorial there is quite a nice one. This is to do with risk assessments that we talked about previously and the different stages of risk assessment. So we are looking currently with out of hours provision for giving advice and specialist advice. So when we get a call, quite normally it comes in on a Friday evening or a Friday when everybody's gone home, and it's having a system in place, which predominantly we've got a very good system in place, but we do need to enhance that. It's recognised where we do need to enhance that at the moment for any enforcement activity and giving guidance. But as I've said previously, our operational crews and our supervision managers have got a pretty good standard understanding of fire safety to the level qualification they've got. So most things in the first instance can be looked at, investigated, and then sought if they need some further information. That is a contingency that we do currently have, but we are looking at extending that for a bit more of a robust look at going forwards.
Pete, sorry, Pete, is there a timeline to that?
Yes, we've got the beginning of October. We've got some options, that a paper that's going to be presented to our SLT at the beginning of October on that one.
Thank you.
We're also looking at ensuring we've got the right people, the right qualifications, in the right places for enforcement activity. We do have had quite a move around in recent couple of years. We've got a really good succession planning programme put in place at the moment, which we're very fortunate, having been funded on the back of the Grenfell incident from central government, from the Home Office, which we've invested wisely in updating, upskilling, new positions coming in, and also qualifications. I'll just stress the point that it takes 18 months to get somebody qualified into a specialist role with experience as well that comes into the back of that. So it's not a quick turnaround of people to do that. So we are looking and focusing on that.
Okay, thank you.
The existing future challenges that we've got coming at the moment is quality assurance programme, looking at all aspects of our individuals, our specialists and non-specialists, and how we go about looking at how the quality assurance is maintained through CPD, continual professional development as well. So our staff are fully aided as possibly to keep their competency levels standard. As I mentioned right the way through this presentation, it's a changing world and it's changing very rapidly. So to keep everybody up to date and skilled is quite a challenge. So we see that as a future challenge at the moment. We're looking at also introduction of a new audit and feedback form for businesses so we can see how we fare. We haven't done this, we've trialed this, it's been quite successful. We're using QR codes, we're using many different methods as well to invite businesses to feedback on how how they have perceived us. And at the moment, it's been relatively positive on the trial. It's getting people obviously to fill those surveys in to give us some feedback of how we're performing at the moment. And also, finally, to identify different trends to direct us in the future. That's quite a large sort of area that we're looking, but training, we have a training department, specialists, and it looks all things protection at the moment, which we haven't had in the future, which is very exciting, that we've used over the last 2 years, and it's proven to be really worthwhile because it is a large topic. In the past we haven't had that opportunity, so that's a really good area that we've moved on. I'm just about there, Commissioner, honestly. With the existing and future challenges, I think those areas there, we've probably covered most of those as we've gone through, but it's basically looking at trying to streamline different areas as we go forwards. We're doing a lot of this work through our management information system and changes to that system, which will give us that underpinning understanding and clear pathway forwards to giving us everything that we can do in this department. It is, I use the term exciting, and that might be a bit extreme, but it is exciting because the future, from my time, which is just over 30 years in the department, not in the department, sorry, in the service, it's really moving forwards very, very quickly, and we're keeping up with the times at the moment. So it does make things very good at the moment. And finally, as we go through, the last one is the impacts that this is having. We do work to, Damien did mention about the fire standards, which are national fire standards. We have one for protection, and those areas there about improving the health and safety and well-being of the communities is absolutely paramount. We are there to reduce the trends analysis that we do from protection, which stems across to fire investigation as well, and it links into the two of those. We do look at this, and we are trying to make some complete differences. We feed in nationally as well, any trends. We've just been doing some really good work on, unfortunately, some very sadly, a couple of fatalities that we had, which involved medical beds that we've had. So we've done some research on that, and we're putting that forwards nationally for awareness. I think the coroner will also be pushing that forwards for national awareness as well on these, and we're working with the manufacturers. So it's an example of how we can reduce the risks and hazards that have been identified, unfortunately, as we've moved forwards. So hopefully we're aligning everything through the protection fire standards, which also links into the risk and resource model, the fire and rescue plan, of course, and the objectives within there. Going forwards, so we're looking at better to understand self and trusted partners. We're also looking into linking with the HMI requirements that have been identified for the areas of improvement, which we've touched on, which link into protection. A lot of information. I apologise, and I did speak very quickly on that one in the time that I've got. I could speak forever and a day on this subject because it is a very big passion of mine.
Pete, thank you so much, Pete. And there is a lot of information, and just to say to those that are watching, obviously all this information will be on my website, and it's great to hear that it's been pushed forward and starting to be delivered as well, which is just fantastic. So thank you very much, Pete. I really appreciate you attending today. So we're coming on to the spotlight section. So I'm going to rattle slightly through these questions, but they are still nonetheless very, very much needed. So the first one, and Chief Jonathan, I don't know if you want to answer these. So the public will be aware of the changes made in the fire service, which means that all staff must have disclosure and barring service checks. So the question is, can you tell the public what is happening in North Yorkshire and York regarding this?
Certainly, and it's a great question. So it was in July of this year where the legislation for the Rehabilitation of Offenders Act was changed, which now includes fire service staff. Now, for some years, North Yorkshire has had the policy where we would put all frontline staff through checks, which also included certain staff that were in certain roles, such as prevention and protection or community safety roles, would also have enhanced checks. And we've continued on there. What we're using the rollout now is to make sure we're reducing those checks from 5 years down to 3 years, and all frontline staff, all staff volunteers, everybody within the organisation will now go through the DBS checks. This, of course, will take time, as all services are facing. We have the funds, and we are now looking to how we allocate the resources to support it, but we're hoping that by April of next year, or the end of the financial year, we're well on way and on track to have delivered the entirety of the organisation, having gone through the DBS checks.
Thank you, Jonathan, and I wholeheartedly support you in that. Okay. So the next question is,
Sure.
Commissioned by the NFCC and the Firefighters Charity, a Nottingham Trent University research study has been published in the health and wellbeing of the fire and rescue service sector.
Yes.
So the question is, what intent does North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service have to review and utilise the findings of this research?
Well, we had a presentation from the professor who wrote that through the National Chiefs Council, and of course we brought that straight back into service. We already have a very, very supportive model and offer to our staff across police and fire through our Enable colleagues, which is brilliant. We have a wellbeing strategy, and the strategy focuses on core areas of physical, social, mental and financial wellbeing to try and wholeheartedly, holistically support our staff. Now, what we've used within there is looking to benchmark what we're doing against that report, but that report is predominantly to shape the National Chief Council's next wellbeing strategy. So we'll make sure we're embedded in there, we'll make sure we're doing the gap analysis against there, and it will also inform our next wellbeing strategy as well.
Thank you very much. And the last question, which is the longest one. So
Okay.
The Fire Standards Board set up to oversee the identification, organisation, development and maintenance of professional standards.
Yeah.
And has launched 2 new fire standards, which is fire control and communications and engagement. So the Fire Standards Board has now published 16 standards. A progress update against standards came to SLT in April 23. It will be a significant undertaking to be compliant with all the standards. So the question is, what progress are North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service made towards embedding these standards within the service, and what gaps exist and what plans are in place to complete this?
Okay, well, those fire standards are coming thick and fast. So we are accepting those fire standards and it becomes part of our business as usual working. Now we have regular updates. We had one into SLT this month. We've now got gap analysis completed against 10 of the 16 standards. We have started to embed those because each one brings a significant piece of work. And of course, as more standards come, that will increase the workload in there. We have a plan for delivery, but this isn't a point for us or for any service really where you reach the completed part, because each standard needs to be constantly reviewed and reactioned and gap analysis against the service on a constant basis. So by the next couple of months, we'll have all of the gap analysis completed. You receive fire standards updates on a 6-monthly basis into Exec Board. I receive them on a regular basis through our operational leaders on a monthly basis as to where we are. We are making progress. It's significant, but it's part of the holistic turnaround of this organisation, and the standards are just one part of that.
That's great. Thank you very much. That's the end of our spotlight section. So we'll move now into the NYFRS inspection update, and I'm handing over to Damien again, please.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can you see the slides?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you. So as part of our NYFRS inspection in 21-22, we received 2 causes of concern, and they contained 8 recommendations. 3 recommendations in the first cause of concern and 5 in the second. Also, we received 24 areas for improvement across the whole report and the 3 pillars. What we have done since then, we have put in a lot of work into the governance, the reporting mechanisms, and the structures and the action plans to manage those. What we have done in recent months, for the previous 8 months, each of the 11 questions that are contained within the report now have a senior responsible owner who is accountable for that question. So response, prevention, protection, best use of our resources, and those questions in the people section. What then happens with that? Any of the areas for improvement or the causes of concern that sit within those questions are issued to the senior responsible owners. That has allowed us to limit those spans of conversation and really truly have the meaningful conversations about improving the areas that have been identified. The causes of concern that we received, the first one was in the efficiency pillar and was making the best use of our resources. And this one was about how we and our enabling services and our partner organisations provide us with an effective and efficient and value for money service. What we have done from an assurance perspective, when we've spoke to the senior responsible owners, we've identified with them the actions that are needed to take to remedy each of these recommendations. That's across both the cause of concern and areas for improvement. But we've also focused on the characteristics of good, which is published from NYFRS, because we're more than aware that, yes, we've got 24 areas for improvement, but there may be other areas that we need to look at across. So we're taking a really holistic approach on this.
Damien, can I just ask, how
Yes.
are you, can you just give me an example of how you're doing that? And can you just explain to the public that are listening about the 3 pillars? Just explain a little bit more about that, please. Thanks.
Certainly. So I will answer the second bit first, because I'm like that. So the 3 pillars are effectiveness, which are our statutory responsibilities. So prevention, protection, response, resilience, and the way that we understand risk through our risk and resource model and the fire and rescue plan. The second one is efficiency, so it's how we make best use of our resources and our planning for the future. And then the third pillar is all to do with regarding people, so it's culture and values, leadership, having the right people with the right skills. So there's 4 areas in that. It is quite confusing though, Commissioner, because in our next round of inspections, NYFRS have got rid of the pillars, but the questions still remain the same. How we address this with the senior responsible owners, so the head of assurance, myself, and the inspection lead, we have a monthly NYFRS specific meeting that goes forward into the risk and assurance board. And we sit down with the senior responsible owners. They've got a user agreement that they need to sign up to, and we discuss how are they going to address the areas for improvement and the other areas within their question to make the improvements that are required. And we will then track that through an action plan. No service wants to have a cause of concern, but the fact that we have got it has allowed us now, as we move through the improvement journey, to be able to really track our progress and make sure that we are making the improvements that we need across all of the question sets. The second question relates to the people pillar, which is getting the right people with the right skills. And this recommendation, which had 5, was around areas such as absence management, working time directive, but predominantly around our workforce planning. And again, as you can see there, there's a number of individuals that have been identified as the senior responsible owners to take those recommendations, put the actions in place to make sure that we make the progress that is needed. I don't intend, Commissioner, to go through these. This shows you the actions that have been broken down under each of the recommendations. As you can see that they're all green. Having looked through them previously, all the proposed dates for completion are this year, so prior to the 31st of December, that we intend on closing each and every one of those recommendations if it's in line with those dates. What I will say is there is lots of work that's going on with this. We are making sure where we go through the actions that we certainly look at it, and we want to ensure that everything is done. We don't want to set one of the recommendations to a completed status and find out that we missed an element. So we've looked at it very comprehensively. We're making sure that we've evaluated the work prior to us setting it to that completed status. If they get to completed status, that then gets reported into SLT, our senior leadership team, and that is where final sign-off is for one of the recommendations being closed. And you can see there in this chart that recommendation 1 has actually been set to that completed status. So all of the actions are at green, so they're moving as intended and in line with their completion dates, and we've got a number now that are blue, which is set to that completed status.
And I suppose the question is, when do you expect them all to turn blue? Because I suppose my challenge is a little bit, you know, when the public first look at this section, they'll see green everywhere and they'll just say, oh, that's great, it's all completed. But actually it's not until it turns blue. So there's a bit of a challenge in there for you about that one, about how you display the optics of it. But and there's one here, which I'm just looking at the first one, the roadmap to implementing the findings of Enable the Gateway. So, and that's not going to be completed until the 1st of November this year. So it is a little bit confusing. So is there a point where they're all going to turn blue?
There is. So the completion dates that are in those, all of them, I think the last one is in December of this year. We had it at one of the previous HMI specific meetings that I made sure it was listed within the minutes, where I challenged each of the senior responsible owners, and I'm one of those, that it says it's before the end of this year. Do we all agree that that's where we will get to? I will say on this, Commissioner, and as I move through the presentation, we are ensuring that we're dotting every I, crossing every T before we put them to that completed status. That doesn't prevent HMI-CFRS closing them prior to us turning these blue. If they are no longer concerned, they could close off the cause of concern. But we would still work to make sure that we turn them all blue before the end of this year.
Thank you.
The next one is on our 24 areas for improvement. There has been some work on this. As I suggested, the areas that you see there in the navy blue, the light blue and the red, that aligns to the effectiveness, efficiency and people, and they're the AFIs under each of the sections. They're currently all at green and on track. I think a number of those will very, very quickly go blue. We have quite rightly, as a service, focused in on the causes of concern. That has drawn our attention quite rightly for that. Hopefully, with the progress that we're making, now we're able to broaden out our focus to these areas for improvement, and also the culture and values recommendations that come out of the separate report into fire and rescue services.
Okay, thank you.
Revisit planning. So we had a revisit against the cause of concern at the end of January and February, which was a positive revisit, and we received positive comments and a letter published on the HMI-CFRS website that talked about the positive way in which we have planned our activity. We hosted HMI-CFRS for a second revisit between the 4th and the 7th of September. As a service, we prepared individuals for their meetings. There was also a focus group with our middle managers. It was really pleasing that we received feedback at the point that the inspectors left, in the way that all our staff across all of the interviews and the focus group had engaged with the inspectors, and they noted the sort of positivity in the way in which our staff engaged with them. On the 13th of September, we received a hot debrief, which you're aware of as you attended, Commissioner, where they gave us their initial findings. Those initial findings was very positive. They were positive about the actions that we had taken, which is the change to what we received in February, where it was about the plans that we had done. Unfortunately, at that meeting, there was no indication if they're going to close the cause of concern or not, but they did have a date that they would submit a letter to yourself and the Chief Fire Officer, which was the first part of October, but they did also indicate that they may be able to communicate this earlier, but as of yet, we haven't heard if any of the causes of concern have been discharged.
Yeah, can I just come in on that, Damien, because I was part of the revisit debrief, the hot debrief, as you term it, and just to say they really were, HMI, very positive about the way that, NYFRS, were able to support them in their looking at information that they needed to, and they were very complimentary about the support they got from FRS. So I'd like to congratulate you, Chief, and your team, including you, Damien, about the support you gave them, and they were very pleased. So I just want to echo that. And Chief, can I bring you in?
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, it was just on the back of what Damien had said there. It was my opportunity to thank all of the organisation. There's been an inordinate amount of work that's gone into there. So I'm hoping that we have that positive outcome from the HMI. It was a positive meeting, but nonetheless, we have made an inordinate amount of change. I don't think anybody could walk through this organisation now and not recognise that. But ultimately, whilst I'm steering the organisation, everyone else underneath is working extensively to make sure that the public are receiving a better service and they're in a better working environment. So personally and professionally, thank you all within the organisation. Thank you.
Absolutely, I'd like to echo that too. Thank you very much, Chief. Right, back to you, Damien.
Thank you, Commissioner. Round 3 inspection dates have been announced, so we will get our document request, which will include a self-assessment, the week commencing the 4th of November 2024, and our inspection field work will be the week commencing the 6th of January 2025. So that gives us 14 or 15 months to ensure that we maintain this level of activity. Hopefully, if we get the results that we want, we will broaden that focus out and we will continue to report in this forum with the progress, not only against the causes of concern, but also the culture and value recommendations and those areas for improvement. But also, we will ensure that we're looking at those characteristics of good that are published within HMI to make sure that we're on track for the improvement that we all want. And that is the end of the presentation, Commissioner, and I'll ask if there's any further questions.
I'm looking around the virtual room and I don't think so. So thank you very much, Damien. That was very comprehensive. Thank you. Right. We're just 2 minutes over now, so let's go to the 2 public questions that we've got. Simon, are you bringing those up, please? Okay, right. So the first one, Mr. B from Harrogate. With your role set to be abolished next year and the Conservative choosing a different candidate for next year's mayoral election, what assurances can you give to the public that you will remain committed to improving the police and the fire service in North Yorkshire and York until the mayoral role is created? So obviously that's a question for me. So, as I am the single elected individual with the strategic responsibility for the totality of police, fire and crime in York and North Yorkshire, as you can imagine, I'm absolutely focused on the job in hand and will carry on a clear commitment to carry on 100% delivering for our communities until I finish the role. Thank you. So the next question is Mr. C from Harrogate, and it's an update following the HMIC FRS report. Now, I think, Mr. C from Harrogate, that we've covered this actually, and there is an awful lot of information and content within the reports and that we've covered. So you're really asking for an overview of the update of the work on each of those areas to rectify the matter. So I think that's really clear. If it isn't and you want additional information, I'm more than happy. So just email in and we can get that information to you. Right. Okay, thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you to everybody watching. Thank you to everyone taking part. I wish you a good afternoon, what's left of it, and we will see you the next time. So thank you very much for watching.
Thank you all. Goodbye.